Can Karl-Anthony Towns leave his stamp on this Eastern Conference Finals and really put his mark on the postseason for the Knicks? And can OG Anunoby be the key to potentially slowing down Pascal Siakam for the Pacers? I got all that and much more today on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And I want to thank you all for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit the auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. On today's episode, I'm continuing a conversation that started yesterday with our buddy Prez from the Strickland. I've noted normally a big draft guy, but this is typically what we're a few days away from June, and we're not talking about the draft yet. Yes, that's correct. For once, the Knicks are real deep in the playoffs. So I brought Prez on to talk about the Eastern Conference Finals. We started this conversation yesterday, so go check that out if you haven't already. But today, we're going to talk about the double big alignment. I get into a little bit of stats about just how dangerous the Pacers have been through the first three quarters and how the Knicks can hope to combat that. We talk about how Cat can potentially put his stamp on this series. And then we'll talk about OG Anunoby and what he might be able to do to Pascal Siakam to slow him down. So lots of great stuff. I'm not going to hold this up any further. Let's get into it with Prez. To your point about the double big, Cat and Mitch plus 8.4 points per 100 possessions in 90 minutes together this postseason. That's per NBA stats. So, I mean, look, you look at Mitch's two-man combos with pretty much everyone. I just looked at it while you were talking there, just out of curiosity. I mean, Mitch with damn near anyone is a positive, plus 17.2 with Josh Hart in 119 minutes, plus 11.4 with Deuce in 160 minutes, plus 10.7 with Brunson in 151 minutes so far. So, I mean, actually the guy that they've played least with him out of all the, the seven-man rotation is Cat. I think probably on Tibbs' part, because sometimes those two just have to come out one for each other, whatever. But as long as Indy isn't going to spam that, but even if they do, and if Mitch just ends up making one of two free throws a number of times and they get certain guys in foul trouble, I think I'm with you where their margin for error on guys that they can allow to get into foul trouble by playing Hack-a-Mitch is fairly low. And I think that we sort of saw that play out against Boston once or twice too, where that like I guess Boston was underestimating just how bad Porzingis was playing in certain games and just essentially threw Cornette out there like the fourth line hockey goon to just like wrap up Mitch for like 5 straight plays and rack up personal fouls. But I don't know if Indy really has someone like that they're going to be willing to just do that with, or if they do, it's going to, I think, severely potentially impact what they can do on the offensive end. If you're essentially just sending like, to use your example, like if you send out Obi Toppin or, Thomas Bryant or Jarius Walker or whoever else, like to just wrap up Mitch and force those fouls. I think from the Knicks perspective, you're just looking at that like, well, all right. I mean, you guys are just going to get certain, you're going to use certain guys to just sop up fouls, I guess. But how is that going to affect what you're trying to do on the offensive end without having your guys that have been shooting crazy good for you out there this whole postseason? So we'll see how they end up trying to deploy that whole thing. But all in all, the Cat Mitch lineup, in a postseason where like the starters have been, I would say good at best, but mid to bad plenty during the postseason and during the second half of the season overall as a total unit. I think working Mitch in there and especially working in some double big against a team that presumably will have some rebounding issues against you. If you're able to field a Cat and Mitch lineup, the Knicks could potentially be in a situation where they could, get a lot of offensive rebounds, play a little bit of rebound skip ball, and just use that as opportunities to get extra shots, to eat clock, to get the Pacers tired out on the defensive end. As long as they keep up with them in transition, hopefully they're in pretty good shape. But that brings me to another thing I wanted to talk about. The overall, uh, I guess, just the way that the Pacers are winning their games. They're getting ahead early. They're scoring a lot of points in the first three quarters in this postseason. I went through. I had to do some napkin math myself because this is not an easy stat to just find and pull. But throughout this postseason so far, the Pacers are averaging 89.2 points through the first three quarters this postseason. That is, for a lot of these games, almost as much as the entire four quarters for the Knicks or their opponents in that Detroit series, and early on in that Celtics series. I mean, they've just been playing a in the trenches, slow, playoff style brand of basketball, and yet the Pacers are just still running, still gunning. I mean, I'll bring up their overall offensive numbers real quick. Pacers, just in raw points per game, outscoring the Knicks by almost 10 in this series, or in this postseason, I should say, 117.7 to 106.8. The Knicks versus Pacers opponent points per game, similar delta, but the Pacers are still doing it better, 112.2 opponent points per game for them versus 105.9 for the Knicks. So the Knicks only outscoring opponents by less than a point per game this postseason, whereas the Pacers are at 5.5. And even if you look at the per 100 stats, it's roughly the same. The Knicks, it's just the Knicks number and their opponent's number go up, but they're still only up by about 1 point, whereas the Pacers are still pretty consistently outscoring teams by about 5 points per 100 possessions as well. All that is to say, Prez, if you're the Knicks, how are you trying to control the tempo in this series? Or put differently, do you try to do what's actually been fairly productive, I would say, for the Knicks this year, and play up to their tempo, play more transition, try to get out and transition more, generate more steals, whatever, and kind of beat them at their own game? Or do you think there's a way that they could slow this thing down and just play good enough transition defense to keep these guys under control during this series?
I think that's really it with them. The Knicks are never going to match the Pacers' pace. The biggest risk for the Knicks is they're often playing 4-on-5 because Brunson or Cat fall over on a make or a miss. And then when things are really going bad, not only do you have that, but you have various Knicks cutting at the wrong time. If you're a Cat, no, if you're McCall or OG, or crashing at ill-advised time if you're a Hart or Cat. And that means that several Knicks are below the foul line. And that's just like RIP. You're not going to catch up to the other teams running. So they have to be really disciplined like they were in game 6. I mean, transition defense was probably the main thing they talked about, if I had to guess, after getting shellacked in game 5. Some of that was just like simple transition, like somebody defend Derek White, right? Like it's not like they were out here running complex transition globetrotter stuff. This guy Derek White was just jogging up the floor and like sneaking to the 3-point line, and nobody saw him or tried to find him. So you got to limit the transition stuff. On the offensive side, the Knicks, they're not gonna match the pace, but like they have to do their thing of selective transition, which is like overall pace slow, but still get a good amount of blocks and steals that lead to transition, or a good amount of rebounds for Hart that lead to transition. I think even though the Knicks are slower, their stock steal and block numbers are pretty solid, both on the season and in the playoffs, despite having way less possessions, because you have guys like OG and McCall and Hart and Deuce and Mitch all just being demons off and on the ball. So the Pacers are gonna do that, right? Like Hallie's he's gonna try stuff, and some of it is gonna be risky. Like you have to be ready to force him to do higher risk stuff. and capitalize on that. One of the Knicks matchups, I had tracked all the there was one game, I forget which one, where the Pacers had like a zillion turnovers versus us, and I was tracking them, and a lot of them were just like, in my notes, were just like Hallie dumb pass. Like, if you can force them to do something a little more risky, the Knicks are the kind of team. They ain't OKC, but they got enough steals and deflections guys to kind of capitalize on that. And the same with Siakam and Turner. Like, those guys are good near the hoop, but they're 7-footers. They're not ball handlers. So you'll have a chance if they dribble, you will have a chance to take the ball from them. And Siakam's a good passer, but he's kind of like Cat in that, like, once he's like, I'm a scorer, like, that's what he's gonna try to do, right? He's not necessarily gonna manipulate the D like that. So just fall down less. That's my main thing. I want them to do. Just fall down a little less.
All right, I'll be back in with Prez in just a moment, and we'll talk through Karl-Anthony Towns and how he can potentially make his mark on this series and really make his mark on this postseason in a way that he hasn't quite done yet, in terms of like pure dominance, which he definitely did against the Pacers during the regular season. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know about our friends over at Skims. And when I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was definitely intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from friends and family, so I had to give it a try. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, whether it's fit or comfort or just finding the right style for me. And Skims changed all that. Their men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. And I tried the Skims 3-inch stretch boxer brief, and let me tell you, it's my new favorite. I was a little unsure about the higher inseam, the 3-inch versus I was usually a 5-inch guy, because I was worried about them bunching up and potentially feeling like, like briefs, like tighty whities, whatever. Not the case at all. They stick to your leg really nicely. They don't bunch up, and they're just overall really comfy. And the best compliment I can give them is that you barely know that you're wearing underwear, which is pretty dope. It's a really nice set of underwear that doesn't ride up, and you never really are perceiving it. So shop Skims Men's at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores, including their flagship store on Fifth Avenue in New York. And of course, let them know we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA basketball. Yeah, it's gonna really depend on. Unfortunately, I hate to put it on this, but I feel like this series, a lot of it is gonna come down to what sort of tone is established by the refs early. Like,
Totally.
I feel like watching just what I did of the Pacers so far this postseason, which is admittedly not like a ton, but watching some of the games I did again with them against like the Cavs, it seemed like things were it, in some cases called really loose, like what the Knicks have experienced, I think, in the first two series, and yet in other ways called much tighter. And the one thing that I will say is that I noticed, and I mean, this is a big thing I noticed during I think it was during the final game for the Pacers and the Cavs, where was that the one where Matherin punched DeAndre Hunter in the chest, and like it
Well,
seems
he
like
hit him with like the 1-inch Bruce Lee punch or whatever.
exactly, like the punch to the sternum, which like hurts like a mother. Like, I can understand Hunter getting that mad about that, but it seems like the Pacers fancy themselves like an irritant. Like they want to try to get under someone's
They
skin.
will. They did
Yeah,
try to that last year with us. They're 100% gonna try again this year.
yes. And that's their identity. So to me, I look at that of like the number one guy that I look at and I say you need to play as under control as you've ever played in your life is Cat in that regard. Because I think the Cat is the one guy that we see that if he feels like calls aren't going his way, if he feels like guys are getting to hook him too much, if he feels like, whatever, we see him throw the elbows. like the blatant, like, oh, I'm quote unquote making a basketball move, but really my elbow is like over my shoulder level as I'm trying to like spin for this hoop right now. Like he'll pull one of those out. He will, he'll just like start incessantly hand fighting with someone to the point where he gets called for a foul for it. He does all these things that kind of make you scratch your head. And to me, he stands out as one of the guys that has the biggest potential for the Knicks to swing this series. I mean, you brought it up briefly a minute ago, but 30.3 points, 12 boards versus the Pacers in the 3 games this season. I mean, that he was against the Pacers, I think, about as good as he was against any other single team. I think they have very few answers for him if things get called a certain way. But if they're able to get away with a lot of contact on him and he's unhappy with it, I think he's one of the guys that has the potential to lose his cool. And I think if he is in foul trouble versus almost anyone else for the Knicks in this series, it's going to be detrimental because I think that he has the greatest opportunity to step in and like score a bunch of points, win you a game, win you 2 games, maybe win you 3 games, like whatever, like be your leading scorer in a number of games in the series. Because if we know one thing about these guys, they're gonna try to throw the world at Jalen Brunson. And he still managed to toast them in last year's playoffs pretty consistently anyway, even with Nemhard on him, even with Neesmith on him, whatever. But they're gonna put those guys on him, and I think they have a much better chance of stopping him than like Siakam does or anyone that the Pacers can throw at Cat do. Um, where do you sit on Cat? Is there any other? I know that you kind of talked about it already, but are there any things that you want to see out of Cat in this series to potentially put his stamp on this and kind of put his stamp on these playoffs in a way that we haven't really seen yet? Because it's mostly been he's had a couple games where he's kind of played the secondary scorer pretty well, but I wouldn't say it's been underwhelming from him in the playoffs, but I just don't know that he's had like a signature series or even a signature game just yet, and I feel like that is probably going to come in this series.
Yeah, I mean, we had games where they run one play for Cat the entire game. They being Tibbs and Jalen Brunson. In both series, uh, for different reasons, he was not the focal point or close to it. On offense. He got loose a little bit in the last game where they were more deliberate about getting him trailer threes and opportunities for him to just be matched up with a center from way far out. That's the kind of thing that I could see continuing, just because of how it happened, right? Like after getting just belt to ass smoked by the Celtics, they had their meeting, looked at the film, and were really intentional about what comes next. So if they bring that same level of detail, this isn't some complicated thing, right? It's literally just like Cat go up the floor slow and then just get ready to get the ball like 30 feet away and then do whatever you want. So like if they do that, I think that'll open things up for him. I do agree that like he's the most likely Nick to just be like, "What? Like that was a foul. I can't believe it." And then fall over, and then we're playing 4-on-5, and then they go on a run, and then Hallie hits annoying transition threes and blah blah blah. But at the same time, like the Pacers the Pacers foul a lot. They're in the playoffs, I think only the Pistons, only by a little bit, foul more than them. And it's because they are the same style of irritant. They're not like the Celtics, where it's big dudes setting moving screens and 240-pound Jalen Brown deciding, nope, I'm not jacked enough, so I'm going to grab your jersey on every play. No, it's just more like handsy shit. Hands and elbows all up in your business. Probably a lot of shit talking. Trying to just see how in your shirt they can be without the refs calling a foul. Um, they don't have OKC's reputation, so they're gonna try it, but they don't get as much from it as OKC. And by that I mean, like if you look at the playoffs, OKC and Indiana are the next 2 teams after Detroit in terms of fouls per game, but OKC gets like a zillion steals from it and blocks because that's their whole thing. And the Pacers it helps their defense being like that, just like Detroit. But the Knicks are a good free throw shooting team, right? Except for Mitch. So like you might not get as much out of that. And there might be games where Cat gets in early foul trouble, and then we get Mitch and lineups with Mitch and Hart, or right, or lineups with Mitch and 4 shooters, and like that's his own type of problem for Indiana. So like part of me is like, damn, like just like Detroit and just like Boston, we might have a couple games where they just cause Cat to get himself out of the game. But the pivots we have are not the worst things in the world versus the Pacers. So at least that is like kind of a silver lining. The downside is obviously if Cat is in foul trouble, you can't do the double big, which is my favorite thing that I want Tibbs to do, right? So there's that. And you lose that arrow in your quiver. So it'll be interesting to see. If the last thing I'll say is like when we played them last year, it was like this handsiness was amped up to 10 because we had no other ball handlers. It was just we didn't even have fake ball handlers. Our secondary scorer and ball handler and point guard was Dante DiVincenzo. And his game plan was just like, give me a pick. I'm shooting it. That was pretty much it. Like he was not super interested in getting into the rim or anything like that. So they would just have guys hound Brunson, and Brunson had to run off like 18 screens like prime Rip Hamilton or something just to get the freaking ball. And like I don't think it's easier for Brunson to take advantage of other teams' handsiness when he has the talent that he has next to him. And that's when we see him get to his like elite balance of like, I'm scoring on you, but also I'm passing just enough that you don't have no idea what I'm going to do. Right. So like the key is for him to strike that balance early. Unlike in the Detroit series where he was like, I'm going to spend the first 2 games trying to prove that I'm getting fouled. Please do not do that.
All right, I'll be right back in with Prez to talk through some OG Anunoby and how he might be able to potentially help stop Pascal Siakam and potentially be a big swing factor in this series if the Knicks are able to utilize that matchup well. But first, I want to remind you all about our friends over at CarGurus. And shopping for a car should be exciting, not exhausting, but between the confusing prices and hidden fees, it can feel overwhelming. That's why I love using CarGurus. They help you cut through the noise and show you the best deals with full confidence. And with over 4 million listings, CarGurus has more new and used cars than any other major online marketplace in the US. They verify dealers, provide real price analysis, and give you the tools and data you need to make the right choice without second guessing yourself. And I mentioned it yesterday. I'll mention it again today. I'm currently in the market potentially to get a new used car. I drove a Rivian one time and I was like in love with that car. And so as much as I love my Prius, I think I'm about ready to move up to an EV and potentially to a truck, get something a little bigger. But it's been tough looking for the right deals. So CarGurus has been great. I've got alerts set, so they tell me whenever new ones are listed by me. Hopefully, I'll be behind the wheel of my dream car soon, and then I can come back with my full on endorsement, being like, "Heck yeah, I found it. I'm driving it. Everything's awesome." But anyway, buy or sell your next car today with CarGurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com. It is funny to see the discourse around Brunson still. Everybody still being like, "All he does is throw his head back and like try to draw fouls." Is like, I would challenge anyone to watch any of these games since that second game against Detroit and count the amount of times that he throws his head back.
It
It's
doesn't matter, bro. The one once he had those first 2 games, we
yeah,
lost that argument in court forever now.
yeah, exactly. It's like they just that's Exhibit A for the rest of time. Apparently, it's
Exactly.
just that is
We were
who
winning the
Jalen is.
argument. It was just reputational stuff before, but once he had like I just will never forget after that game 2, there was Knicks fans on the timeline just like, yeah, he might be guilty, man. He might be a drifter. And I was like, no, he's become the evil that they wanted him to be.
And then he took it all back, thankfully. But nobody will ever
Thankfully.
acknowledge that now. Nobody outside of New York will ever acknowledge that, at least. All right, to kind of start winding down here. It, I think the individual matchups and how the Knicks choose to deploy their guys early on are going to be pretty interesting. And I'm curious what you think of this potential alignment, or tell me if you think that this defensive alignment needs work. Uh, I feel like Mikal Bridges probably guards Tyrese Halliburton. I feel like OG Anunoby definitely will guard Pascal Siakam. I pulled these numbers actually, just because I was curious. And this season, in the regular season against Pascal Siakam, he had him for 71.1 partial possessions. I don't know how they get the point numbers of that for that, but either way, had a pretty solid amount of time spent on Pascal Siakam. Siakam shot 35.7% overall from the floor, 12.5% from three when guarded by OG Anunoby this year. So I think that's the one must. You have to have OG Anunoby guarding Pascal Siakam, and that will hopefully negate him a bit. You have Cat on Miles Turner, Hart on Neesmith, and Brunson on Nemhard. Do you see anything with that stands out to you that you would say, I don't know if that's going to work? Do you think that Brunson's going to be the right guy to put on a Nemhard, or if Nemhard keeps shooting like 50% from three, is there a world where you can adjust things and say, okay, Hart can guard Halliburton, Brunson can maybe take Neesmith, and you put Mikal on Nemhard or something like that? Do you think that's worth even exploring, or do you think that they should probably stick to something that's more traditionally what you would want, and just use Mikal to try to take Halliburton out of the game and kind of try to do what everyone else has been trying to do and make everybody else on this team beat you?
I think that initial matchup is probably correct. But I think they'll definitely try stuff both because they want to and also because they have to, right? Like Pacers are gonna have a zillion screens on and off ball, and matchups are gonna get weird. Like if there's minutes where Siakam's not in the game and Hallie is, like put OG on Hallie, right? Like just to set the demon out on him. Like screw it, right? Like I would not mind that. See how Cat does on Siakam, right? Like if you give it to like we've seen some stretches where Miles he's gotten much better in the post. So like on someone like Josh Hart or Brunson or McCall, he can probably score, but like you could probably get away with a possession or two, especially with help. So like it'll be interesting to see the matchups. But I think that's mostly going to be how it plays out, and then the coverages will kind of dictate what the matchups are at the end of a possession.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's probably going to be that initial alignment as well. And then hopefully, they showed, I think, less so in the Celtics series, but more so in the Pistons series, the diversified coverages of switching between Mikal and OG on
Hmm.
Cade, and what that was able to do to him. And because both those guys defend very different ways, where Mikal is more like just keeps his guy in front of him, like is more about containing you with the length and everything, whereas OG is like, if you want to try to get physical, like be my guest, but it's not going to go well for you. Like, and also I think OG has some of the best recovery instincts on the team, as far as like feinting a guy into thinking like, yeah, you're safe to get by me, and then getting in there with a free hand, or to strip the ball away, or just getting a recovery block on someone, when they think that they're safe. I think that's kind of his brand. Hart too, I think, so, is it might just be enough, like for a guy in Halliburton that is not necessarily like the most explosive guy off the dribble from the perimeter, and not necessarily a guy that like gets like 10 feet of elevation on his shot when he goes up for a shot. A guy like Hart, who's a little undersized, but roughly the same size as Halliburton, it might be enough to disturb him just having a Josh Hart on him who can shuffle his feet well, who can, play passing lanes well, and essentially just be a pest the entire time. So how they decide to guard Halliburton, I think is going to be interesting. I think that maybe much like they did McHale and OG switching on Cade in that first series, they might try a little bit of switching McHale and Hart around on who guards Hallie and use McHale. Then, if Hart can handle Hallie, then you can use McHale to kind of shut down another shooter that's playing really well or whatever the case may be. Or if they can still have all three of the wing stop guys out there when Siakam's not out there, that frees up OG Anunoby to potentially play someone else and cause some more ruckus that way too. So it'll be interesting to see how it all goes. All right, that's it for now with Prez, but I do have one more little treat. I'm going to get the series prediction from Prez. He notes in the episode that he has been loudly wrong about the first two series for the Knicks. So maybe his prediction is with a grain of salt. Maybe maybe he jinxes the Knicks, tries to do a reverse jinx, something like that. I don't know. We'll see what he ends up picking, but we both give our predictions on that. And then Prez turns things around on me. He is a podcast host himself, after all, asked me a few questions to end the show. So one more bonus episode coming for you guys. Nice little content overload, something to keep you going, keep you nice and satiated up until tip off. So check out that later. It'll be out later in your feeds, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're listening on the pod side. But until then, thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace out, everybody.